feel like we can run the table. I really do.
Giants looking for a stop. They're going to air it out. Rodgers does this better than anybody. End zone, Cobb, touchdown! Unbelievable! This to send the Packers into the NFC Championship game. It is good! The Packers are moving on! Aaron Rodgers has done it again!
Grassy Posse Packer Nation, welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you're not to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom Grassi, and boy, oh boy, do we have a treat for you. Not only have we never talked to a Ravens fan before, but now, I didn't get just one Ravens fan. I got dos Ravens fans. For my non-Spanish speakers, that means two. And I gotta say, I am very, very excited for this. I went on the Ravens subreddit, and they gave me the best sons of guns they could find. In fact, we're going to be talking to them right now, and so it is a pleasure to introduce the both of you. First one, Mr. MDLawSoHard2, which is his Reddit name, of course, obviously, unless his given name is that, which no judgment, and Josh. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Oh, we're doing perfect. We are doing perfect.
Really excited to be here talking with you.
Yeah, it's I'm really excited to have you. We've actually only had two triple threats, if you will, in the history of Packcast, and I have to say that each episode has been phenomenal, and I expect that this episode will be great too, because we don't talk much. Like, the Packers and Ravens don't really interact very often.
That's true, and that's fortunate for us. I don't like playing Aaron Rodgers, even though we're not going to see him Sunday. I prefer not to play the Packers.
Yeah,
yeah, you guys haven't been too kind to us over the years. We got one in on you on the Brett Favre Monday Night Football about 10 years ago, but since that, it's been pretty lopsided. So.
Yep, and and that has stuck with me. Actually, I still remember watching that game 10 years ago, and that game made me very, very sad. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I feel like when it comes to the AFC and NFC, like, they're completely different conferences. Like, we're in almost like our own worlds, and that, like, we don't see these teams usually like until like every 4 years. So it's always like an interesting combo when we come back 4 years later and we're playing each other like with a completely different team.
Yeah, and I just remember, we'll put this out there though. Ravens Nation loves Pack Nation for being the Steelers in the Super Bowl. We were all rooting for the Cheeseheads.
Well, I am so happy to oblige. Literally right behind me is the newspaper clipping of the Packers beating the Steelers. It is hung and framed permanently on my wall, so I hope that you can take solace in that I enjoyed it just as much as you did.
It was nothing's better to a Ravens fan than watching the Steelers and the Patriots lose.
Yeah. I could only imagine. Yeah, you guys and the Patriots have some damn good games in the playoffs, and it seems like you guys always meet, and it could go either way every single year, and I can understand your hatred for the Patriots at the same time.
Yeah, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Harbaugh there. You look at a couple of our matchups, and 2009, 2012, almost 2014, we weren't the better team, but he got them going, and we definitely consistently play those guys hard, so they're always fun games.
Yeah. And so, like, before we get into a bunch of stuff that we want to talk to, I kind of just want to gauge both of you, and I always like to ask my guests this, of, like, how you guys actually became Ravens fans. Was it something, kind of just growing up, where you're at? Is it something that's, like, been passed down from the family? Is it because, like, you like the color of their jerseys when you were 6? Like, kind of give me the inside scoop of how you became a Ravens fan.
Yeah, so I was 8. My dad took me to a game. We beat the Bengals like 40-0 or something. I watched every game the rest of that season, and going to sound like a bit of a bandwagoner here, but ended up winning the Super Bowl, best defense ever.
Yep.
So I was hooked. After that, I always wanted to go to Ravens games. That was like my birthday present every year. And now it's, 17 years later and 13 straight years without missing a home game. So
nice.
It's been a long journey, but love the team, and they've been great to me.
Yeah, I mean that's the way to do it. And listen, there is no risk of sounding like a bandwagon fan, because the only reason I'm a Packers fan is because my dad's a Cowboys fan, and I went into school one day and heard that the Packers beat the Cowboys, and I was a fan ever since, just in spite. So there's no judgment here when it comes to bandwagoning.
Yeah, we're both from Maryland, so that helps. The Ravens came in '96. I was way too young in '96 to realize what was happening, but I first started watching them the tail end of the '99 season, and then I vividly remember the 2000 season, winning the Super Bowl. I remember my cafeteria. I was in elementary school, and they had Ravens beat Giants and purple cutout letters that the elementary school kids made, and I had a poster. It was like the three-headed Lewis monster. We had Ray Lewis, Jamal Lewis, and Jermaine Lewis.
Nice.
So I've been hooked since. Haven't been to as many games as Josh, but I go to a few a year, and I haven't missed a game on TV in at least 12 years.
Nice.
So they're a huge part of my life, and I love them to death.
Yeah, man. I definitely I hear you on that. And like you said too, like that, it's one of those things that, like, especially if you're growing up in Maryland, and you have something that kind of brings the community together, like a sports win, like whether it's like a World Series, whether it's a Stanley Cup, whether it's a Super Bowl, like everybody's a fan on that day. And it's just like, you're wearing purple, I'm wearing purple, like we're friends. And like that, especially you're in elementary school, you're just like, this is awesome.
Yeah, you can definitely see that in Baltimore.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
You're out at the bar, you're slamming back a few beers, someone comes in, they're wearing a Ravens hat. That's my new best friend for the night.
Yeah. It's literally
working in the city, I work and live in the city, and it can definitely, for outsiders, it can be kind of split at times. You've got the Inner Harbor, and you've got Fed and Fells, and kind of some of the more upscale areas, and then there's somewhat of a stark contrast there. But man, the team unites everybody. The Ravens, the O's, both of them. But definitely the Ravens. You're driving through West Baltimore on game day, and people got their jerseys and their hats, and definitely a big unifying thing for a pretty split city. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you on that. And I mean, like, you guys had, when we're talking about like recent Super Bowl wins, I mean, you guys are obviously up there. 2013, you guys win the Super Bowl. We're all the way back in our 2010 season. And so, walking through that season in particular, because I feel like for me personally, just an outsider looking in, like that's a big turning point for your franchise. Because before that, you have guys like Joe Flacco who are never in that elite conversation, right? Like they're never up there with like the Bradys, the Rodgers, you know the drill, But then, in his contract year, Flacco wins a Super Bowl. They're blackout and all, they do it. So at that moment, you win the Super Bowl, and you know that Flacco's going to get paid. Obviously, he gets a ridiculous contract. Where are you sitting in 2013? You guys just won the Super Bowl, and you're about to pay Flacco a ton of money. Do you agree with the decision? Are you kind of like, this might lock us into something that we're not going to be able to get out of? Where are both of your takes on it?
I can just preface that one thing that we agree, we're both Flacco apologists. So, and I'll be completely honest, his contract was not on my mind after the win. It was to really, really just to bring it back to the season before that. We throw a touchdown pass to Lee Evans to go up with 10 seconds left against the Patriots in the AFC Championship, and it's knocked out of his hand. So then we're about to hit a 23-yard field goal to go into overtime, and kind of shanks it. So we're like that close, and then you start this season. Ray Lewis tears his tricep, and Ladarius Webb, who was our best corner at the time, goes down with an ACL. Have a few more injuries. Ray Lewis is at the end of his career. Ed Reed is, and then Ray just announces, this is my last ride.
Yeah.
And that entire off season that entire postseason run was probably one of the greatest memories I have. But I just remember sitting in my dorm. I was in undergrad at the time, and once Jimmy Smith, I definitely wouldn't say it was holding. Once he stonewalled Crabtree on 3 straight fades, I'll be honest, I cried. I just cried. I was so ecstatic. It was great. But to answer your question, at the time, I don't think there was any other option. We had to take Flacco.
Yeah.
We were losing the face of our franchise in Ray Lewis. We knew he was retiring. We knew we weren't re-signing Ed Reed. We knew Matt Burke was retiring. We had a bunch of other vets, Anquan Bolt, Bernard Pollard, several others that were leaving. So when you look at the people that were returning that were the face of the Ravens franchise at the time, we had Terrell Suggs still, and we had Ray Rice, and we had Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
And Joe Flacco just had the greatest postseason run of all time. So I don't think they were paying him as much for the run as what they were projecting him to be. And I think they were projecting him to take those postseason stats that he had and translate that into great statistical seasons.
Yeah.
At the time, I completely agree with the contract. It does suck because we could have signed him the year before. I think they wanted like $15 million a year, and we were at 12, and they couldn't bridge the gap. And then we ended up having to go up to like 20.
Yep.
So it would have been nice if we got it the season before, but at the time, I can't blame Ozzie at all for the decision.
Yeah. So at least my take on the whole Joe thing, trying to stick to it mostly analytically. If you look at his contract and you look at his play, I don't think Joe, and this is probably going to sound like a bit of a hot take, but I don't think Joe's play has been drastically different over the 10-year span of his career. Mm-hmm. Now, he wasn't elite in the first 5 years. He's not elite in the last 5 years. All that stuff, it spawned from, one shitty press conference that Joe said something and here we've got memes 6 years later, but what do you want the guy to say? Yeah. But anyways, outside of elite memes, if you look at his contract and you look at who he was and where we were as a franchise, the Kyle Bowlers and the Elvis Gerbacks and the Chris Redmonds and the Stoney Cases and, it was miserable. And especially in the modern, NFL offense, you can't win with those guys.
No.
And I remember watching, I think it was 2009, Joe's second year, and we lost the game, but he drove us down the field to win the game at Pittsburgh. And he hit a dude dead in the hands to win the game, and they dropped it. And that's been a recurring theme throughout Joe's career. LawSoHard mentioned the drop at the AFC Championship game at New England.
Yeah.
I could offer 24 instances of Joe icing his veins, and someone drops the ball. But that's besides the point. Again, if you look at his numbers, people have been waiting to shit on this contract since he signed it. And, 2013, we were bad. His cap hit was $7 million. Mm-hmm. Joe's contract wasn't the reason we were bad in 2013.
Yeah. 2015,
his cap hit was still, it was like $14 million.
Yep.
It was manageable. Now, obviously, that's gone up the past couple years. But you can't go back to quarterback carousel after a guy just puts up Super Bowl MVP, best run ever.
Yeah.
I don't blame Ozzie at all for signing it. Obviously, he hadn't played up to it, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Even post Super Bowl, Ray Rice, Ozzie can't predict that. That's a dead contract after that happens.
Yeah.
Pitta blowing out his hip twice and being overpaid.
Yeah.
Ladarius Webb's torn his ACL 2 or 3 times and was overpaid. There's been plenty of bad cap casualties and problems. Joe's only been a small part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking at it. I was looking at his stats earlier today, and just looking at in the past couple seasons. 2015, he's 14 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Not amazing numbers, whatever. 2016, he throws over 4,000 yards, 20 TDs, 15 picks. This year, a little bit different. Hasn't reached 2,000 yards, 8 TDs, 10 interceptions. So, I mean, like you were saying before, the gameplay isn't stellar by any means, but you would also have other teams that would I would argue, kill to get a guy like Joe Flacco, when they're starting like these mediocre backup quarterbacks who are getting paid like ridiculous money, because quarterbacks are so ridiculously valuable in today's NFL game. So while you're saying,
absolutely,
yeah, like while you could argue, like while one could argue, like, oh my God, they so overpaid Flacco, like you guys said, like, what are you gonna do? Like, what other choice do you possibly have?
Well, and I'd love to touch on that real quick. You threw out some stats there, and that's one of my biggest, not pet peeves, but the fantasy obsession of modern sports. Everyone looks at a stat line and thinks that tells the whole story. There's a number out there. Joe right now, he's I think 8 touchdowns and 10 picks.
Yeah.
Well, I think 7 of those have hit receivers in the hands.
Yeah.
3 of them.
What do you want the dude to do?
Yeah.
It's crazy. The Bears game, we ended up losing in overtime, and he hits Brashad Perriman dead in the hands down the sideline, and he volleyballs it to the defender. He hits Chris Moore right in the hands and volleyballs it to a defender. And I get that those are going to happen sometimes. But, like, if you look at the talent that surrounded Joe post-Super Bowl, outside of AARP Steve Smith Sr.,
yeah.
What have we given the dude?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I agree with that. I mean, like, you guys even look at like guy like Jeremy Maclin, right? Like a guy who was supposed to be like, from my understanding, was supposed to at least like improve that position. I mean, the guy hasn't put up like the most amazing numbers in the world. I don't. When you start thinking of Ravens wide receivers, I don't know who stands out of the pack. Again, the big guy that you were just mentioning before was Pitta, because that guy was like catching everything, and then injuries couldn't keep him on the field. So yeah, you're 100% right in like, what do you want the guy to do when you don't have the talent that surrounds him?
And another thing with Pitta that we brought him up, I think he really shed some light on the state of the Ravens offense in general. He would know it better than anyone, and that is able to commentate on it. And he said, basically the offense is designed right now that Joe has one read, and if it's not there, he has to throw the check down. So if you look at his numbers, he has all these short passes.
Yeah.
And, if you're on the Ravens sub during the game thread, and everyone's like, why would he throw that? Why would he throw that? If that's the play call coming in, there's not much you can do. I think part of that is he has 3 undrafted players on the offensive line and a 5th or 6th round pick. And then we have our 1st round, number 6 overall left tackle. But, if you look at the time he has, the offensive line has played better throughout the season. Mm-hmm. But I think that's another huge factor. I think if you put Joe behind the Cowboys' offensive line, I think we would be talking about a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
With the right.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make too many excuses for the guy. Like, again, he's no Aaron Rodgers. Like, some guys can go out there and they can pull, make Randall Cobb look like number ones, and they can, who was the one in that Arizona playoff game, shoot the Hail Mary to him, Jeff Janis or something like that.
Oh, yeah, Jeff Janis, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, that's one thing. But Joe's never been that guy, and he wasn't that guy before the contract. He's not that guy after the contract. And, as far as the one read and check down type of offense, Marty Mornhinweg, I don't know. Again, we can speculate on that, and no one's in the film room or knows the play calls. It's kind of tough from the outside looking in to kind of guess what's happening there. But I don't think anyone's confusing Marty Mornhinweg with who's the guy out in L.A. now, Sean McVay, or Belichick or Gase or some other guy running some great offense.
Yeah, and I think you also brought up a good point before in that if you take a look at the Super Bowl run, and you were your team, I would argue your identity has always been around your defense, right? It's been about like smash mouth football and having these amazing defensive stars that are the faces of the team, and now you look at that and you don't have them anymore. And so I think that's a part of it too. I mean, like you take a guy and I'm going to try to make this comparison, but you look at a guy like Peyton Manning and with what he did with the Broncos the year that they won the Super Bowl. I argue that's not Peyton Manning. You put almost any quarterback that's starting today behind that defense, you know, they're going deep into the playoffs, if not winning the Super Bowl. You know, I think if you put Joe Flacco on the Broncos team from a couple years ago, they win a Super Bowl. So now that you don't have those defensive pieces, I think now it puts a bigger spotlight on the offense and saying, like, now look at all these flaws, which may not have been as bad before, but are just now, like, they're being hyper-focused on.
I think that I agree. I think that that's why they've been building our defense up through the draft. We're starting to get back to that point now where our defenses, you know, had some hiccups. We had a whole lot of rushing yards allowed early in the season. That game in Jacksonville was awful.
Yeah.
But when they're making these really nice turnovers and we're putting the offense on the field with short field position, and then we're blowing out these teams, you know, it looks really good. But the offense right now, it's not built to just go and outgun another team. You know, we're not gonna get into a sparring match with Tom Brady and just go blow for blow and just keep throwing touchdowns right now. It's just not what the team's built like.
Yeah.
And not having the dominant defense that our defense didn't allow 100 yards for like on the ground for like 3 straight seasons or something absurd like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we don't have that, it really has affected the team, and that's why you've been seeing the Ravens putting out these 9-7, 8-8 years. But that's why I think the first 4 or 5 picks this year were all defense.
Yeah.
We've been defensive heavy drafting for several seasons now, and I think you're starting to see the Ravens defense come around. Now we have the C.J. Mosley, the Brandon Williams.
Yep.
Jimmy Smith is one of the top-rated cornerbacks in the league right now. And really, I'm a huge believer in having the right system around Flacco. I think he needs a really strong running game and then get the play action going. And then his strength is the deep ball. And now we got the running game going, but we're still not throwing it deep. I'm not a Morningwig fan. Can't stand him. I wish Gary Kubiak was our offensive coordinator. I think we would have some different results. But, I mean, I think you're right. Not having as dominant of a defense has definitely exposed the lackluster offense, especially when we're getting 3 and outs and the defense is going back on and they're tired. And I think that's definitely affected giving up the amount of rushing yards we had this year as well.
Yeah. And I think also we touched on this a little bit, you know, the running game, and it has gotten progressively better. But I think, and I don't want to like harp on this because obviously it's happened a while ago, but like Ray Rice, right? Like that's a blow to your franchise. You know, you have a fantastic running back. He's putting up consistent yards. He's a threat in the passing game, and then he's just gone. So like, where is your reaction for Ray Rice? Obviously it's a blow to the team. Are we, how do I ask this nice? Like, are we surprised that he hasn't like been back to the NFL? Are you surprised that he hasn't been back considering what the NFL has allowed? You know what I mean?
Well, I'd love to touch on that real quick.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So Ray, and I feel kind of strongly about this. I didn't mean to interject there. But and again, this might be a little controversial, but I'm going to start this statement off by saying that I strongly believe Ray Rice is a good guy. Mm-hmm. And you know, again, for Packers fans or outside, you know, non-Ravens fans, I completely understand, you know, how that statement could come off as blasphemy. But you know, as a live, breathe, eat, and you know, sleep Ravens fan for the entirety of Ray Rice's career, that dude did more for Baltimore than, you know, almost anyone in franchise history. He was constantly giving back to the community. He was, you know, a stand-up teammate. He was doing charity. He was great to the fans. And you know, we can get into the whole, you know, what happened that night and yada, yada. And that's kind of been discussed to death.
Yes.
I don't think that, you know, again, I'm not, I'm not his wife. I don't live with him. I don't know whether, it was a one-time instance or not. I'd like to believe in my heart of hearts that, it was a one-time screw up that happened. As far as Ray Rice's talent, if you look at, everyone points to the 2013 season and they go, well, if he was any good, he would have gotten a second chance. Look at Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
No one on that 2013 offense did anything. It was the worst offense we've had in a decade. It was terrible. And, 2014, you look at Ray and in training camp, he looked phenomenal. He looked like, his young self. And if you look at the year Justin Forsett had in Gary Kubiak's scheme, I strongly believe Ray would have put up 1,500 all-purpose yards that year. Mm-hmm. And, going back to Flacco, and you mentioned it, Ray was a huge part of that Super Bowl run. And I think it's part of the reason why the offense has shifted so much is that, when you have that dual threat kind of guy, where they don't know if it's going to be run, pass, and even if you check it down, he's going to get you, 7-8 yards.
Yeah.
That opens up a lot. And bringing it back to the Packers, I'm kind of excited for this weekend. We'll see if he stays on the field. But we got old Daniel Woodhead back out there again. And I think between Alex Collins running nicely and, Woodhead in the slot or coming out of the backfield, hopefully we'll be able to recapture a little bit of that Ray Rice magic.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on Rice, too. I can't echo enough what Josh just said. This is one of the just A-plus guys in the locker room. He's the last person on that entire team I would have expected what happened from. Mm-hmm. He did so much. He had charities. He was visiting children's hospitals in Baltimore. He was just a great guy. And, I still have my Ray Rice shirt, my Hey Diddle Diddle Ray Rice up the middle.
Yeah.
That 4th and 29 conversion against the Chargers, that's if he didn't make that play, we might not have made the playoffs and we wouldn't have won the Super Bowl. He's that important to the legacy of our franchise. They had to cut him when that video came,
of course.
With all the backlash, and I was a little disappointed with the amount of fans that turned in their right jerseys for other jerseys, but I understand. I totally understand. You can't hit any. I don't think anyone should hit anyone in general, regardless of gender. And it's unfortunate. So I understand. I think it's kind of like the Kaepernick effect, where the reason Kaepernick doesn't have a job, he was the first one to kneel, and it was all on video. And I think Rice was the first one where everyone saw a video. He wasn't the first NFL player to commit domestic violence, but it was the first one that was heavily
I
publicized.
agree, yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason. I thought he was going to get another shot. I knew he wouldn't with the Ravens. But I think the bigger impact of Ray Rice now to this Ravens team is when we cut him, it accelerated his signing bonus. And so it was no longer prorated. And the cap hit. The cap penalty that year was really bad. And it was for 2 years because we cut him after July 1st. So that really put us in a bigger cap bind than Flacco's contract. And also, if you look at the types of players the Ravens bring in now, they tend to go more towards I wouldn't say we only drafted choir boys, but we did draft Tim Williams this year. He had a gun charge. I don't think it was a conviction. But the Ravens are probably a lot less likely to go for that risky guy who might have some off the field issues now, because I don't think Bisciotti wants to go through that again. I don't think Ozzie does. I don't think Harbaugh does. So I think they're trying to stay out of the controversy. That's why I was so surprised when Harbaugh dropped Kaepernick's name in that press conference, because I thought they were tired of the negative publicity. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely hear you with that, and I completely agree that while he's definitely not the first, I feel like that erupted such a big media storm because it wasn't even just the video. I think that it ignited the fact of you have guys like, Josh Gordon, who's being suspended for a tons of time for weed. And meanwhile, Ray Rice in the beginning, is only getting a couple of games. And I think it started that argument. And obviously Goodell needed to almost kind of set an example, right? And kind of, because Goodell is now infamous for doing that. But you even look at a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, right? I can't tell you how many times people are still on the Zeke bandwagon, or like will apologize for him, or will be like, well, like the person's lying, what have you, regardless of what the story is. But I think does it at all kind of like taint your experience? So, like, you guys focused on like how great of a guy he was, and I don't doubt that in any way, shape, or form. And I mean, like, obviously it's not the same caliber, but like Brett Favre, he comes out and I haven't forgotten, when he's like sexually harassing like cheerleaders and stuff and sending, pictures of his John everywhere, like that, like, like, does it taint like his legacy at all? Does it taint his, like, and when I mean by legacy, I mean like his on the field talent, like, does it kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth for either of you based on what happened?
For his on-the-field legacy, it doesn't for me. Definitely it wouldn't. It taints my perception of him as a human being, even though I think he's a great person and that he's done these things. But I've been drunk and I've never hit a woman in the face, so I understand the animosity towards him for that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't taint what he did on the field, because some of the things he did on the field I've never seen replicated. He could turn a 2-yard check down into a huge play, and everyone's talking about now how Flacco does these check downs. Flacco's been checking down for a long time.
Yeah.
He just was checking down to Ray Rice, who could get 20, 30 yards after the catch, make a linebacker miss. Where Benjamin Watson and Dennis Pitta and some of the other slower tight ends or older running backs, or not as talented running backs, can't. But I think what Josh said earlier, I think that's why we're all excited to have Woodhead back, because Woodhead's one of those few elite pass-catching running backs.
Yeah.
And maybe not elite running back overall, but he is an elite pass-catching running back.
Oh, definitely.
And just in that one drive he played with us, he had 3 or 4 receptions for like 34 yards.
Yep.
And the one drive he played all season, and it was just like, wow, this is going to be great. Like, it's having like a little bit different skill set than Ray Rice, but kind of like having that again. And that was torn away really quick. So I'm excited to have him back this week.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my opinion of Ray would be higher if the event hadn't happened, of course.
Of course.
But again, like, you're starting to see nowadays, and I don't mean to, compare it. It's hard without going in depth, but, you look at the actors that you're hearing about nowadays and the politicians and everyone's got skeletons in their closet. And even taking it back to Baltimore sports. Now with Ray, it's a little different. There was a video and he definitely did it. There's no denying that.
Sure.
But you talk about someone's perception being changed. You look at Ray Lewis, 20 years later, people still claim that the guy's a murderer.
Yep.
When there was an extensive trial that, pretty much proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt that not only is he not a murderer, but his buddies that he ratted on, had eyewitness testimony, were seen to have acted in self-defense. So obviously everyone's actions, they paint your opinion of the person. But, in the aftermath of the Ray thing, someone had a good quote, I'd hate to be judged by my worst day. And I think, unfortunately, just due to the nature of the video and sports media, that's how he'll be remembered nationally forever. Which is a bit of a shame, but no, he was a great player, and it's a shame it happened, and he certainly paid for it. Lost millions and lost his job, and I'm sure he'll be spending the next 50 years of his life trying to atone for that. So
yeah, no, I think that was very well said. And so kind of obviously you guys are getting Woodhead back. So I mean these past few seasons where obviously things haven't panned out the way that we want to. This season right now you're sitting in second in the NFC North. You're 4-5. The Steelers are 7-2. While we thought the Steelers were like in the beginning of the season, everyone was like, oh, they suck. Like this is like bad. They've starting to get their groove back a little bit. So I think we've touched on this. And like we're building the defense back up, the offensive line, we're drafting left tackles. In both of your opinions, what do you think is like the key component that's missing from your team that you need to get back into the playoff hunt, to get back into being that dominant team?
I think number one, the offensive line. We got to have the guys that can pass block. Our run blocking's been great this season. I think that's a big testament to Greg Roman coming in as well. You can look through that guy's history and see how he's turned around rushing games. I think it starts up front. I think we have some talent at wide receiver. I think Mike Wallace is still an above-average wide receiver. I think Jeremy Macklin's a really good wide receiver. I think Rashad Perryman is starting to become a bit of a bust.
Yeah.
I'm sure when the sub hears this, they'll disagree a little bit because he's definitely been the scapegoat, one of the scapegoats of the Ravens sub. But I do know that Joe's never had a Julio Jones, an AJ Green, a Reggie Wayne. He's never had an elite wide receiver. You know, Anquan Bolden was good for us, but
yeah,
Anquan Bolden wasn't a Julio Jones.
No.
And Anquan Bolden was a great receiver, but he wasn't a Julio Jones. You know, we've never had that in Baltimore. And Steve Smith was good too, but he was 35. I mean, we need a really good playmaking wide receiver and then some pass protection. And I think that the Ravens defense is building towards something special. And it's pretty young, besides Eric Weddle and Brandon Carr. The rest of the Ravens defense is all really young. A lot of them on the rookie deals. So I think that really just solidifying that O-line. And we're missing all-pro Marshall Yanda. We are missing Alex Lewis, is a second-year guy with a lot of promise that was starting last year. I think that and Jensen's turning into a hell of a center. I think we could really use a right tackle and then some more depth on the O-line and maybe get a nice playmaking wide receiver in the draft. And I think that's really the biggest issue with the Ravens right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make two kind of bold predictions here, and then I'll talk about where we need to go. One, while I don't think we're a very good team this year, and I'll touch on that in a second, we are going to make the playoffs. Whether it's the 8-8 or 9-7, we hold all the tiebreakers on the Bills, the Raiders, and the Dolphins.
Yeah.
And if you look at their schedules, they're just absolutely murderous down the stretch. The Bills and the Dolphins have to play each other twice. They both have to play the Patriots twice. The Raiders have, the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Chargers. They have like 7 playoff teams to end the year. Whereas, the Ravens have this giant run of, no offense to the Packers, but Brett Hundley, Tom Savage, Deshaun Kaiser,
yep.
Dalton at home to end the year, and then Brissett's in there.
Yep.
And then we got the Lions and the Steelers too, which will be tough games. But the second bold prediction that you kind of touched on, Pittsburgh, this is kind of the same old song and dance. And while their defense has stepped up a little bit, and I'm sure, my bias will show through here, I'm going to go ahead and predict that, they don't make it very far this season either. If you look at Ben's numbers and you look at that offense, they haven't reached anywhere near max capacity.
No.
And maybe they'll get it going, but there's been a lot of frustrations with Haley there for a while. And that's just not a team to me. They've been this dominant team for 5 straight years, and then they get in the playoffs and, what comes of it. They certainly don't match up well with New England. I think it'd be a good game between them and KC. But anyways, as far as the Ravens go, the defense is rounding into form. I think Ozzie really needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and see if defense is still a way that, you win in 2017. Obviously, we saw with the Panthers and the Broncos, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it now, like the Giants were supposed to be a great defense. They're giving up 50 every other week.
Oh, yeah.
The Broncos were supposed to be a great defense. They're collapsing. It's tough. Like, now, again, we lost Brandon Williams for a couple weeks, but there was a 4-week stretch we were giving up like 200 yards a game on the ground. And that's certainly not a dominant defense. We're still ranked number 3 in DVOA for the defense. So, like, how do you expect – and like last year, we were a top 5 defense. We spend $8.5 million a year in free agency on Tony Jefferson. We spend our first 4 picks on the draft on the defense. They should be a lockdown number 1 unit, and they've kind of faltered at the end of games. You look at that Tennessee game, the offense finally got them back in it, and then as soon as the defense needed to stop, Mariota takes them right down the field and scores. But as far as fixing it, Law So Hard, touched on it at a couple of points. Our guards, we had Yonda go down. We're on like our 5th and 6th guards. We've lost Kenneth Dixon for the year, kind of a promising running back there, which Alex Collins has stepped in great. And again, even going back to Joe's got to play better, and Joe knows that, and the team knows that. And maybe they'll move on from him, in the next year or so. They're kind of tied to him through 2018. There's really no getting out of that contract. So maybe they can draft a guy and groom him. But I think they'd be better off just working with what they have. I think getting back to a strong running game, play action passing, and not giving up leads late in the game is where we really need to focus.
Yeah, I get you. And looking ahead, as you were just talking about, so you're saying that the Ravens are making the playoffs, which, listen, it's definitely not out of the question in any way, shape, or form. And so I want to do like the season kind of predictions, if you will, and then we'll focus on Sunday. So obviously we're thinking at 8-8, 9-7, somewhere around there, making the wild card. All right, what else we got?
I definitely think 8 wins going to make this season available. The NFC is definitely the superior conference this season, no doubt about it. If you look at the top contenders for the 6th seed, I mean, either 4 and 5 or 5 and 4.
Yeah.
And it's the 5 and 4 Bills, as Josh just said, they have an insane schedule coming up. So I think the Ravens personally are going to go 9-7. I think the 2 home teams are going to be at Pittsburgh and against the Lions.
Yeah.
I think 9-7 is the most realistic record. Maybe they take one of those 2 and lose one that they should win. But you look at the last 3 games, they're playing the Colts, the Browns, and the Bengals. I mean, I wouldn't call anything a circle win with this team, but those are wins that should happen. I think 9-7 and definitely will win the first playoff game. Joe Flacco's never lost the first playoff game. Every year he's made the playoffs, he's won at least one game. Most years he's won multiple. So I think we get in. We can make the noise. The only team that really is somewhat scary is the Patriots. I don't think the Steelers are very good. Fuck the Steelers, number 1. Number 2, fuck the Steelers. But you look at Antonio Brown's numbers versus the Ravens. He hasn't gone over 100 yards, I don't think, ever against the Ravens. Mm-hmm. We usually hold him somewhere between 30 and 50 yards. We usually keep Le'Veon Bell in check. We didn't. The game we lost to them earlier this season, that was with our big man Brandon Williams out, and I think that had to do a lot with it. So if we hold, Bell in check, Browns, is a non-factor against us because Jimmy Smith locks him down every time. Roethlisberger usually beats us, and this year I don't think he's capable of doing it. And I think their defense is better than I thought it was going to be, but their secondary has some huge holes, and I think that that'll be exploited. The Chiefs present some matchup issues against the Ravens, but I think that getting in and winning one game is definitely reasonable, and maybe we get some 2012, 2013 magic out of Flacco and see what happens. But I think I agree with Josh. I think making the playoffs is something that I predict as well, because just how bad the AFC is. I think that just based on that factor alone is my main reason. A normal year, 9-7, 8-8's not making it, but this year I think it will.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Which is, like, I don't know, like, it makes me miss Aaron Rodgers even more. It just hurts. It cuts me so deep because I'm like, man, the NFC is so exciting right now. And like I'm scrolling down like the NFL rankings, and I got to go all the way down into the 20s to find the Packers, and I'm like, this is sad. This does not feel good. And looking at Sunday, and I know you guys, I don't want to say you're looking past the Packers, but Obviously, this is a very different game if Aaron Rodgers was playing. So
Oh, certainly.
So looking ahead at Sunday's game, because I know that before Rodgers goes down, when you had Packer fans looking, we were looking past you guys. I'll say that bluntly. And that especially because like that's when the Jaguars game was happening, and I was like, oh okay, like this shouldn't be an issue. Rodgers is gonna tear him up. Now Huntley wins his first career game, yay, against the Bears. Very exciting. I had a good time on Sunday. But now he's coming up against a defense who is not the Bears defense. And so you do have guys like Danny Woodhead back. Our defense is consistently struggling. We are talking about firing Dom Capers every single week since 2011. So, I mean, where do you see this game going on Sunday? Do you see it as a blowout? Do you see it as a close game? What are you guys going to be looking for?
Yeah, so as far as this Sunday goes, obviously my deepest condolences to Packers fans on the Rodgers injury. I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. I'm going to come out and say that, hot take here, Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback I've ever watched play in the NFL.
I knew I liked you. I knew that you were my favorite fans. I knew that. I knew it from the minute you came on the show.
Yeah. So, the schedule came out, and Rodgers is the kind of guy that, we've had a lot of trouble with getting out of the pocket, and, you got to contain him, and things break downfield. Obviously, with Huntley in, the game's a lot different. But I'll say, if any Ravens fan is looking past this game, they're naive. First of all, it's a road game, which our road record historically is abysmal. But, on top of that, Huntley, while again, he's not even Alex Smith, much less Aaron Rodgers but now Alex Smith having a phenomenal year. I shouldn't have taken that shot, but
I understood the reference.
But if you look at this Sunday, I think it's going to be a tough game. Hardball teams coming off the bye are like 8-1 or something, so that obviously helps. But and getting Woodhead back is going to help, but it's going to be a tough game. As far as your guys, obviously you have a lot of receiving threats there. We have a pretty deep secondary. I was really looking forward to that battle. Before Rodgers got hurt. Really, I think it's going to come down to mistake-free football, and obviously that's a tired cliche. But if you look at the two teams and the talent and what they're putting up on offense right now, it's whichever team capitalizes off the other team's big gas. And I think it's going to be a great game on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's huge for the Ravens because, as LawSoHard was pointing out, 9-7, 8-8, those are the two records we keep looking at. And honestly, this is the game that's the difference, in my opinion. I don't think we match up very well with the Lions. Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, national TV. We might steal one of those two, but this is the winnable game that's going to be. I think Vegas has us maybe a 2-point favorite. This is that coin toss game that we're going to need to comfortably be looking at the playoffs.
Yeah, I hear you. And listen, and Brett Huntley was making those throws. Like he had some damn good throws. I think he's getting better. But it's gonna be very interesting to see what he does against a very different team this week in the Ravens.
I think I'm not exaggerating when I call this a must-win game for the Ravens. I think this is one of those season-turning games where if we can pull out a win in Green Bay, it can lead to some momentum and get us to that 9-7 record that we're looking at to make the playoffs. I think the Ravens will win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any stretch of the mind, but the factors why I think the Ravens are going to win is because the Packers might be the only team that has more injuries than the Ravens. Unfortunately for you guys, and we've been dealing with this for several years where we've been leading the league in IR for like 3 out of the last 4 years. But, that's no excuse against the Packers because the Packers have probably been hit harder than the Ravens this season. And so, feel for you guys there. It's awful. It sucks when you have this nice team built and then pieces just start dwindling due to injury.
Yeah.
So the other thing, though, is that the Ravens are getting healthy at the right time. We get Woodhead back. Macklin was struggling with some injuries. Jimmy Smith was struggling with an Achilles. Not that you would know because he's leading in passer rating at him for cornerbacks. So we're getting healthy. And then off the bye, I think Harbaugh's something absurd, like 10-2. I don't think it's been 12 seasons. It's like 8-2. It's a very good win percentage off the bye.
Mm-hmm.
I think coming off the bye and having our health is going to be huge for the Ravens, and that's why I think the Ravens should win this game. And I think that they realize, this is a must-win game for us. And if we want to make the playoffs, and jobs are possibly on the line, though I don't think Harbaugh's on the hot seat yet. Many fans on the sub would disagree. A lot of fans are calling for Harbaugh and Ozzy's job. I think they're both safe for at least another season. But I think this is a really big game. I think Harbaugh's going to have them ready to play. I think 2 weeks of scheming around the Packers defense and just getting healthy and coming off that bye with what we've done previously off of bye weeks, I think the Ravens should win this game. I'm praying they win this game because they need it. They really do.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that both of our teams definitely. If you want to get to the, sitting at 4-5, if you lose this game, that's a hole, and that's gonna be tough to get out of. And I agree with you there. And then for the Packers, I feel like with an incredibly competitive NFC, not even looking at a divisional win, like just trying to sneak into the wild card. We're sitting at 5-4. We start losing more and more games. It's not going to look too good. We still got the Browns to play, and we still got some teams that we definitely should win against. But I think this is definitely big games for both of our teams.
Is Ty Montgomery suiting up this weekend?
I've been looking for that too. I know Aaron Jones is out, so he's definitely out. I've been looking for updates on Monty, and I really couldn't find anything that was concrete on if he was going to be playing. The last thing that I saw was that he was hopeful. So I think McCarthy came out like 3 hours ago and said that he was hopeful that he was going to play because, Monty looked like old Monty on Sunday. I know a lot of people were worried that, with the emergence of Aaron Jones, that Ty was going to be sitting in the back seat. And I have to say Williams looked pretty damn good too last week. So yeah, if Monty can play, I think that gives us a better chance just because he's such a dynamic playmaker. And he's just one of those guys you can dump the ball down to.
Yeah, you guys have a surprising amount of depth that at the running back position this year. Obviously Lacey leaving, but Aaron Jones and Montgomery, and obviously he adds a whole other element, which Hundley as well. His mobility adds a lot, but. Yep. I believe he's definitely playing Sunday, but he has a bit of a hamstring as well, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He hurt it on like that run that he did against the Bears. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it hadn't been a forgiving season for either of our teams, definitely.
No, definitely not. But I hope it's a good game either way, and I always wish your guys' teams luck. I always like the Ravens. They make me happy, and plus they beat the Giants, and living in New York, that makes me very happy. So I'm very much okay with that. But guys, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I know that you guys you want to plug some stuff, so please go ahead, plug the Ravens subreddit, plug anything you're working on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, so I want to plug our Ravens. We were voted as the top NFL sub again. We had the infamous cake meme that made USA Today and made Sports Illustrated. Several other things. I just want to plug Ben Rosen. He is the legendary gift maker. And then I want to plug Chiba Sauer, who got off his 14-day ban today. Red Sky, Chemical Poisons, Elite as Fuck, Deleted, Mr. Bushido, Malkism, Fees 22, Rain Man, John Soft, The Fury and the Sound, and of course, Super Saiyan Sandwich. I love you guys, and you're the reason I keep coming back to the sub.
That was beautiful. That was like, usually people are just like, follow me on Twitter, guys, but you're just like, bam! It's like he just won an Oscar, and he's like, this is the list we're going through.
And I would like to thank God for
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. I'd like to thank Law So Hard for inviting me in the first place. Obviously, shout out to the Ravens sub. Lots of great members there. I've been saying hopefully sometime in the next 3 years we might actually get my Flacco film breakdowns going here. Outside of that, yeah, I appreciate you having me, and best of luck to the Packers for the rest of the season.
Yeah, man. Like I said, to every single one of my guests, I wish you fantastic luck on the rest of the season. Just not Sunday. Any other game, you got it. Yeah, any other game, you got it. But just not this Sunday. But guys,
ditto.
Have a great night. It's been great talking to you guys, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, take care, guys. Our third three-way, a success. Man, that was great. Guy, I love talking to fans that know their stuff. I love talking to fans that are passionate about their team. And a first impression with the Ravens fans, and it was definitely a good one. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com, TomGrossi Comedy, or at Tom Grossi Comedy on the Twitters. Check out Packcast, Packast. It's this podcast. We're here twice a week, and of course with our predictions episode. Every Thursday, we're interviewing fans from opposing teams, so check that out. We're on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, and, of course, the YouTubes. But thank you so much for watching, listening, whatever medium you're doing this in. I'm Tom Grossi, and as always, go Pack Go.